going to try just one more thing and do what I shouldn't do, and that is try that now. Speak to me now.
All right. Any better?
That's better. I just turned it
That's
up a bit.
better. All right.
Okay. Okay. Hi, Andrew,
The
and
things
welcome
no
to
one ever
Booze
tells
Unplugged.
you.
Yeah. These things I'll leave in. Okay, Andrew, I see that having done some research on you, you're bit of a music man, musician. You like your vinyl records, and what's it called? CBD, is it?
Yeah. So basically, what's legal in most states is just below honest marijuana. And so anything CBD, hemp, other forms of cannabis are legal in most states here. And where I live in North Carolina, it's as close as you can possibly get without being full blown marijuana.
Right. Okay. Okay. So it's not in all states then, just some states.
It's not. It's legal at the federal level, and then it's up to each state individually how legal they want to make things. And so it's slowly starting to happen from state to state to state. And at this point, I want to say it's somewhere between 30 to 40 states have some form of legalization.
Okay. Cool. And what would you say the benefits are?
I mean, outside of the obvious recreational purposes, there are actually a ton of health benefits in a lot of different ways from hemp and cannabis derived products. It can help anything from pain management if you're someone that suffers from chronic pain, basic muscle sores and aches, ADD, ADHD, depression, a lot of mental health can fall into if you're using it correctly. There's a lot of benefits involved there. I honestly, the sky's the limit with the potential holistic health benefits of cannabis and hemp. Our bodies are actually built with what's called a cannabinoid system, which is what CBD also stands for. And so we have receptors within our body that are made to take various aspects of the plant and use it for health benefits.
What is it about taking the cannabis correctly, or taking the CBD, shall we say, correctly, as opposed to what a lot of people do over in the UK is that they're just uh, accessing technically illicit cannabis, you know?
Yeah. So it all depends on the individual, and that's where the term microdosing comes into play. And it's just finding what works the best for you individually. Like anything, it can be abused and you can do too much of it and not have a very fun time. But if you dial in, what you're looking to get out of it and speak to a respectable shop owner or a product technician, you can work to find out what ailments or things you're trying to help correct by using cannabis. And then it's just finding that right amount for you. If you're smoking it, how many puffs should you take? If you're taking a gummy, what's the milligram content that's best suited for your personal body and experience? And so there's a lot of trial and error sometimes, but once you kind of find what works well for you, you can use the product and not be noticeably on it. And so you don't necessarily have to walk around looking like you're high as a kite all the time. But you can definitely get what you need out of it to, like I said, help control your pain or help focus if you have a lot of focus issues or your mind wanders a lot. Or honestly, I use it a lot to help with insomnia. So I take it a lot at night just to help get cozy and comfortable in bed and drift off without my mind racing and keeping me up all night.
Yeah, that sounds like a really useful way of using it. I say to a certain extent, I think in the UK it still has a bit of a bad name because it's not really anywhere for CBD that's been, but is in very, very special circumstances for certain conditions, but it's still kind of frowned upon largely.
And unfortunately, even in the States, there's still that huge stigma behind it from, the 90s and Bill Clinton's war on drugs and drugs are bad and all of that. And so it's a constant battle for those of us that support it to shine the light on those other sides and steer that stigma away from, oh, something's bad is going to happen if you take this.
Yeah, yeah. It's been. I mean, I come from before I retired from employment. For 16 years, I worked as a substance misuse counsellor. So, although there was some issues with cannabis, that was kind of we didn't worry too much about people smoking cannabis. We were more concerned about people taking hard drugs or misusing alcohol. So, it's funny we used to call it a substance misuse service. We're trying to over here change the wording now. It's about problematic drug and alcohol use. because the word misuse has negative connotations. Would you say that's the same over the USA? You've got people using that language now?
Yeah, and so I don't want to call it a revolution, but there are those of us that are trying to work towards changing those negative connotations, changing those negative words, changing that negative stigma. And that's a big part of what we're doing on the podcast I host. So shameless plug, I do a podcast called Vinally High, which is all about music and then the recreational, but also further that educational standpoint of cannabis and hemp derived products. And so we do the groundwork ourselves. We find the products, we try them, we speak to the honest truth of how it worked, how it felt. And the more we continue to have these conversations, which is what I love about doing podcasting, the more it's just going to help change that and turn things in the right direction. So I really appreciate you having me on the show to help talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, this is what it's all about. You know, I'm very much in favour of health and well-being um, issues, but also it's about let's be a little bit more radical about things. You know, having worked in as I said, where I worked before, nothing much changed in approaches. To health and well-being on that way. So I'm curious to find out what possible new approaches there are and what challenges there are regarding that. What sort of challenges are you finding, Andrew, in terms of that? I know you're doing with a podcast. Are you finding any other challenges from authorities and so on?
There are always challenges. Luckily, we have not run into anything severely as it comes to the podcast because we've done our research. We know the laws, we know the regulations, we know what we can and cannot do. And as I said earlier, every state is a little bit different. So here in North Carolina, we have legalized hemp and cannabis, but like I said, just a shade shy, that one molecule difference of being full blown marijuana. And down here, like I said, I'm in North Carolina, and you can carry and have a product on you. You can be using it out in public so long as it's not a private domain and the owner says you can't smoke here. As long as you're outside, it's all legal. And the people that are growing and packaging and selling these products have to do their homework and know what the laws require of them as well. So anything that is less than 3% THC content is legal to distribute. And so you have a lot of these vendors that are now teaming up with chemists and outside sources where they can send their product, have it officially tested, get that stamp, that seal of approval on it that says this has been lab tested, and so I know my facts are straight on the content that was within it. And so as long as we stick to those guidelines, there's no problems. One of the ugliest things we run into, as we've already stated, is just people's mentality and the stigma behind it's a drug, so it's got to be bad for you. The other problem right now, and we actually have our first ever bill that has been put in motion here in North Carolina from one of our local House representatives that is trying to pass the full blown medicinal and recreational use of marijuana. And if it passes as written, there is a very heavy, 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 heavy government tax that's going to be placed on it. So the government wants to get their share of everything, and sadly it's probably one of the best ways to regulate it, although it comes at a steep price. And the way it's currently written is it's a 30% tax on any distribution, and then the local shops themselves have the potential to place an additional 2% tax on that. So if this passes, that's a big hurdle, and it's a money factor. And if somebody truly needs something from a medicinal standpoint, whether their doctor is prescribing it or it's something they're exploring on their own, we're going to run into that price problem. So I'll be interested to see how it further develops within our state as opposed to the federal level, and that's something I'm going to be keeping my eye on as this bill progresses.
Okay, do you think if it passes, it might then sort of propagate out? If that's the right word to use, propagate out into other states?
That is a good question. So other states have obviously already legalized it: California, Colorado, Nevada. Honestly, I did not see North Carolina being so far up the list to start the process to pass that bill. So I think if it does go through, there is a high potential for other states surrounding us to have their eyes on that and see how it pans out. And it could play into the next domino effect of our surrounding states taking a deeper look at that and seeing how it goes. So only time will tell. We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens because generally, what happens in the UK, things kind of similar happen in the UK as to what happens in USA. Not always the same, but there's various different things. From my perspective, I'm quite liberal-minded, having worked directly with people with problematic drug and alcohol use, is that putting over prohibition just doesn't work.
Yeah, we
And,
saw how
and
that.
yeah, I'm sort of the advocate of legalization, and then a degree of control, much as you're describing with the cannabis thing, as if it is over there. If it's there's always going to be a bit of illicit use, but if there is a little bit of it that's allowed to be used for recreation, it's not too dangerous, and you're getting all the guidance and all the health guidance around that. That surely has got to be a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and in my opinion, it's honestly it's no different than alcohol, and that's legal. Again, in the wrong hands, it can be abused, and you can cross that state of misuse, but it's still legal. And why can we not do the same across the board for hemp and cannabis? In my opinion, it's no different. You can get health benefits on it, and you can learn how to use it properly. In the right hands, it can be used very, very well and help a lot of things. And you don't always need a doctor prescription for it. We can go down the road to our local smoke shop. We can buy our product. We can come home and we can use it and have no problems. And so I love being able to have these conversations. I love being able to hear other people's standpoints on it. And I love being able to hear the differences in country, region, and how that's being handled. So this is one of my first times, honestly, getting to speak to someone directly about the legalization within another country and how that differs from the United States.
Yeah, I think we're quite a long way from any kind of legalization over here. I think that's probably pretty much down to what comes out in the press over here, and there's very much still that draconian point of view about drugs and alcohol, and what people who have not worked in the environment, their perception of who those people are and what they do, and they always look at the complete negative. Whereas actually, there's so many people, they're just ordinary human beings. It's no different when you think about it. It's no different to having, drinking tea and coffee and having caffeine in it. There's a that's a stimulant. So obviously there are certain categories of people that don't even engage in that, and that's fine. For that, that's what they want to do. That's what they want to believe. I don't see there's any problem with that. But
And on that
yeah,
note,
go on.
one of the biggest things I've learned within the last 5 years is there are differences in the strains, and there are two main categories of strains that you can derive from the cannabis plant. It's called indica and sativa. Back when I was a youth, just recklessly diving into marijuana usage, this wasn't a known fact, and you could get the wrong thing for yourself if you didn't know what you were taking. The big difference is one is more of a relaxer, one is more of a stimulant. So if you're already a high energetic person and you're taking the energetic stimulant sativa blend, you're going to be through the roof. At the same time, if you're generally more of a very down person, or you're dealing with any mental issues that cause you to be more in a down mood, and then you take that indica blend, which is what I think most people associate cannabis with, where it's that feeling where you really just want to sink into your bed or your couch and not move and be very lethargic. If you're already down and you take that, you're going to be even further down. And so it's knowing the strains that work best for you, again, for what you're trying to accomplish, and taking the appropriate one versus the opposite side where it may cause you to tailspin and be in an even worse mood than you're trying to cure.
It's interesting to know, because I guess when it comes down to it, there's a broad spectrum when you're breaking down the molecules of it. As you're explaining, it's not just one size fits all. It's a bit like the spectrum of mental health illnesses. There's such a broad spectrum of how people associate with that. So the treatments have got to be, the treatments have to try and fit what the problem is, rather than just
Exactly.
throwing something out which can exacerbate a problem. And that's where I think the misinformation comes in, isn't it?
It does. There's still a lot of misinformation out there, especially if you want to stay misinformed. And on the adverse side, if you're someone that wants to look further into it, whether you're going to use it or not, but just to know more and learn more, there are a lot of great resources out there to learn more. And that's something we try to bring into our conversations within our podcast. It is, yes, it's all fun and jokes, and we love telling stories and we spin records and listen to music, but there's a serious side to it where we really try our hardest to bring what we've learned into that educational background. the show. So anybody listening to it may hear and learn something they didn't know before. And maybe that'll help push that bar, change that step into a disbeliever, into a believer. And the more and more we can do that, I think the better we're going to be as a society. And it's sad. I was honestly reading an article yesterday on Facebook that was about how, moms are saying they feel they're a better parent when they use cannabis. And of course, all the negativity in the comment section that came below was just absurd. And again, if you want to look at it as, yeah, sure, you're a parent that just gets high all the time and neglects your kids. We don't want to tell that story. That's a bad story. But from a stress management, cannabis can really, really help calm your nerves, take your stress levels down, and be able to be a little bit more functional if you think you need that extra help when you are dealing with a family member, something outrageous your kid did, and you're not in the right headspace to be able to talk to them about it. Am I advocating for sitting down and being blazed out of your mind and having a conversation with your kid? Absolutely not. But if you just need to take that little bit of an edge off, or if you need to keep things steady for your mental state as a whole, day after day after day, I firmly believe it absolutely gives you that ability to have better conversations with those around you.
Okay. Do you get much trouble with spice over there? Do you know what I mean by spice?
I don't.
Ah, right. So we get a lot of problems. It's synthetic cannabinoids that have been produced over here. A few years ago, it used to be referred to as novel psychoactive substances. But spice is something, and it's a big problem in the prison population over here. And it's what happens is it's chemically produced to be like cannabis, but is actually incredibly dangerous and causes people some real serious mental health.
We had that, and I can only speak to my individual state because at that time I wasn't doing a lot of research countrywide. Probably 10 or 15 years ago, there was a lot of synthetic production of what would be, I guess, equivalent to cannabis or marijuana. And no, it wasn't good. It caused a lot of issues. People had a lot of health concerns. And so it was very short lived, luckily. I'm sure it's still out there somewhere, but I don't hear a lot about it. It's not in the mainstream anymore. And I think as states start to legalize more and more, you're finding less and less of that synthetic production because it's not illegal. People don't have to be sneaky. You can have your shop, you can sell the legal product. And, we've been to some shops that are doing great. They know what they're talking about. They care about their customer. They're not there to give them bad product. They're there to actually help them and have them be continuous customers because that's the point, right? You don't want to kill off your clientele who are never going to come back by selling bad drugs or synthetic chemically processed things. And so, yeah, we did have that, but I don't think it's nearly as big of an issue as it was, like I said, 10, maybe 15 years ago.
So do you think that the as you are at the moment over there, then the kind of the gradual legalization of the controlled CBD is actually killed off the market of the more dangerous illicit side of it?
I do. I think it has. And like I said, I haven't heard about it in a long time. And so I don't think that's as big of a problem. Now, obviously, we still have a problem here with much harder drugs and drug use. And I don't think that's ever going to go away, sadly. But I think there's been a lot of positive that has come out of states diving deep into how can we regulate and how can we legalize what we do have legalized. And so each year, I do think we get better and better as more and more states are looking to understand the benefits of the plant and plant medicine and what all we can do with it. And so the more legalization we get, obviously there's still a ton of regulation, but it's steps in the right direction.
Cool. Actually, tell me a bit more about your podcast because that was quite fascinating. I did listen to a little bit of it yesterday.
So we're called Finally
Sounds like you
Health.
have a lot of fun, man.
We do
Sounds like
have
you
a
have a
lot
lot
of
of fun.
we have a lot of fun. We're actually in the middle of our third season right now, so we've only been doing this for a couple years. We wanted a way to bring a hobby into something maybe a little bit more tangible. And so I have been a vinyl collector for a long time, since I was a teenager, starting with just stealing my parents' old records that they weren't listening to anymore, and then eventually buying more and more of my own. I've accumulated quite a vast collection over the years. And a good friend of mine, who's actually my co-host on the show, was over one day. We got into a little bit of plant medicine and then threw an old Bob Dylan record on and just laughed and joked the whole time. And in his state of mind, I think he kind of joked, hey, we should record this next time. And it kind of just snowballed into that's a great idea. But rather than just recording it and us listening back to it to remember all the shenanigans that we had going on, let's do something real with it. Let's put out a podcast. And so it just started with that initial idea, and it evolved into what it is now. The first season was just the two of us listening to music, telling stories, talking about the products that we've used recently. Now we actually bring on guests. So we have bands and recording artists come on. We have shop owners. We have plant growers that are local here to where we are come in, share about what they're doing, share the education. We always spin a record on every episode and we talk a lot about music. And then we just kind of see where the conversation takes us. And it usually evolves into funny stories about life and what we've gone through, whether it be cannabis or just general fun conversation. And we have a good time. We love our guests. We love the conversations we've had out of it. We're learning a lot through it, whether it be plant medicine related or just podcast related. I mean, we came into doing this podcast knowing nothing about podcasting at all. Bought a couple of microphones, plugged them into the laptop, and away we went. So every season, I've learned a bit more about becoming an audio technician, speaking, learning how to have a good podcast and how to grow, and whether or not anything major financial comes out of it. We're not bugging on that. We're just having a good time. It's definitely a hot love, and we enjoy what we do.
What interested me with was when you're talking about the vinyl collection. I picked up on the vinyl straight away. Is I started collecting vinyl about 8 years ago. There's a friend of mine who is honestly, he goes right down a rabbit hole because he works in the music industry, and he's got, you would not believe the amount of records that he owns. And he talked to me about what's important about collection, about first pressings and one thing or another, and looking out for obscure records. So, little story, short little stories. One day I saw advertised on Facebook, someone local to me selling about 100 singles for 10 quid, £10. So I told him about it. He said, "Will you go and buy them?" So I did. And I took him back to his house afterwards. And out of those 100 odd records, there were two that were, one sold for about £120 and the other sold for about £90. And I was great. I thought, great, I found these. And he said to me, "There goes the way of madness, mine is you're going to go down the rabbit hole now and start collecting," which I did. And I've just got, can't probably see behind me, but I've got shelves and shelves of stuff. And most of it's pretty shit, actually. Because I got this thing about selling on Amazon and found that you can sell anything on Amazon. So I got in the early days when Amazon let you in as a vinyl record seller. So I made a bit of money out of that. That's shut. I've shut that down at the moment because everything's in a mess on the record collection, and I need to sort it all out. I just found some of the just the very ordinary stuff people will just buy, and stuff I pick up for for next to nothing from boot fairs and one thing or another would sell. But I'm also interested. I've also bought some stuff. I've also picked up in a uh, what we call charity shops over here in the Virgin, over here in the UK. A few years ago, I picked up a classical album, and it was a Decca, and I knew to look inside that it was the wide rim, the groove on it, and I thought, well, it was 2 quid, and I thought this could be worth 30 quid. When I got it home and I checked out the mark around the edge, on the inside the edge of who it's cut by, it was a lot more rare than I thought. I got about 400 quid for it in the end.
And that's one of the fun parts about collecting. I mean, I don't sell a lot because I buy what I like and what I want to keep. But it's fun to look at what version it is, if it has any of those elements that make it a bit more rare, and watching when you buy something new, the appreciation of the value and if it goes up or down, because sometimes it's random and you never know what's really going to skyrocket in price versus what doesn't. Sometimes something you think does won't at all. Something you least expect all of a sudden will be, you know, through the roof in value if you wanted to resell it. And anytime I go anywhere, I'm always crate digging. If we're going to a thrift store or an actual record store, if I see a record anywhere, I'm digging through the crates, because you never know what kind of hidden gem you're going to find, especially at the thrift stores or the consignment shops where people are just donating something that, I don't listen to this anymore, or so and so died in the family and we're just going through their estate and we're donating this box of records, and I don't care what's in it. And sometimes you find some real holy grails.
Yeah. It's true. It's yeah, some hidden gems that it's sort of the magic that's in somebody's loft, that's a family member that's gone on. And
Especially
sometimes
old.
those things,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, cool. Yes, sometimes those things find their way to the bin, and never get discovered. You're trying to find that little magic one every now and then.
Yep. And if you're looking for that, that's the real fun, especially with older records from the 60s or 70s where so much were pressed, but there might be one that had a misprint or an error. It came out of a pressing studio that's no longer being used. That you can find a million Beatles records, right? Not worth anything. But then there's that one that had that one element, like you were saying earlier, if you know what you're looking for, then now all of a sudden it's not worth $10 anymore. It's worth $1,000, right? But you don't know until you look into it and find what made that record special, or does it have that groove, or that marking on it.
It's funny. I was associating this with there was somebody put on the Facebook news groups about podcasting. Somebody sort of saying, "Oh, all my early podcasts were a bit on the shit side. Shall I get rid of them?" And I'm thinking, no, don't get rid of it, because that's the origin. Because if somebody becomes really goes through the roof with their podcast, their early stuff can be the valuable stuff. And I just put this remark in. I said, can you imagine if the Beatles chucked away all their early, just destroyed all their early stuff? It's when the really early stuff gets, discovered, that somebody's got a copy of a Quarryman. It's worth absolute fortune, because that's what was the original origins of the Beatles, wasn't it?
Yeah. And you want to see that evolution. I saw that exact same post and I don't think I commented on it, but I know what you're talking about. And my mentality, I think, is similar to yours. Why am I going to get rid of that? Whether we amount to anything or not, it's still fun to hear where you started versus where you are now. As you progress in anything, whether it be podcasting or music, it's fun to hear that evolution, even if you laugh at yourself saying, wow, that was really bad when we first started.
Listen to you talking. I think it was the last podcast you did, and you were joking around about being a bass player
Yes.
and about the.
Yeah, many moons ago, I used to play bass guitar when I was in high school and college, but I still own one, but I have not touched it in probably about 10 years. It just hangs on the wall as decoration now.
But I say this friend of mine who's the record collector, he's also a bass player. And when we go out and do a gig, quite often, we'll be at the bar afterwards, and somebody from the audience to come up and they go, "Oh, hi, I really like your performance tonight. Really enjoyed the music you're playing, and it's really good. Oh, it's really cool." I suppose probably because I wear a hat and I've got a bit of a beard, you kind of get that bit of a look. He'll be at the bar with me, and on more than one occasion, they've turned to him and said, "Are you in the band as well?" He's the bass player.
Nobody ever remembers the bass player. And that's the joke that we had on that episode you're referencing, because we had a band on and one of the guys there was the bass player, who was actually new to the band. They just brought him in very recently to replace an ex-member. And the joke was bass players are always incredibly wild. And I said I take offense to that because I used to play bass. But after we talked about it, I kind of agreed. Yeah, you're right. But nobody looks at the bass player, so we have to be a little extra. We're not the lead singer. We're not the front man. We're not the lead guitarist that shreds all the solos. Even the drummers get
Unless you
more
Sting
attention.
or something.
Yeah, right,
Unless you
exactly.
Sting.
So as a
Or there
bass
are
player,
one or two others.
yeah, no, obviously everyone knows Sting, right? But very few people can play bass and achieve Sting status. So we
Yeah,
have to
that's
be a
that's
little over
true.
the top.
Okay. So you're not playing anymore then?
No, I haven't played, like I said. I want to say I picked it up just to see if I still had it, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And the thing I tell everybody is, the phrase, "Oh, it's like riding a bike. You never forget. You can hop back on, and it's just like you never stopped." Playing an instrument is not the same. If you haven't played an instrument in 10 plus years, it is a struggle to pick it back up again and try to remember how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on that.
My wife gets on my case all the time because she wants to hear me play, and I said it'll probably never happen again. I'll just stick to podcasting for right now.
Okay, what was the other? There was another thing I was going to ask. Oh, I was going to ask you. You've been doing some podcasting. You've been around a bit, and I've seen bits and pieces about what you discuss and so on. Who's the most influential person would you say that you've met?
That is a Good question. I don't know if I can say who's the most influential that I've met. We've since starting this project gotten to meet a number of people here locally that just always inspire us because of what they're doing. From a music or a podcasting standpoint, I haven't met a lot of people. We're just starting to dive into putting ourselves out there to be more guests on other people's podcasts. And so we've had some great conversations lately with a few people, but I think everybody I meet is inspiring. If you're doing something I also enjoy, you are an inspiration to me, and I will pick your brain to learn what I can about anything. And so that's what makes this whole thing fun that we are doing. It's the connections and where we can get our inspirations from to always continue to fine tune what we're doing. So I'd list anybody I've done a podcast with as an inspiration because we're all sharing our stories, we're sharing our trials and our tribulations, and we're benefiting through each other, and that is truly inspirational in any capacity.
Yeah, yeah. That's a nice answer. I like that. That's because I was kind of expecting you to come out with a couple of people that you might mention. That for me, if I think of people, and not necessarily someone that I've met, but people that I'm inspired by, is Michael Palin from the Pythons, the Monty Python.
I agree. And here on the state side, well, he's from Canada originally, so I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Green. He was big on MTV in the early 2000s, and he recently put out a documentary. I want to say it's on Hulu that I watched. He did it all himself as kind of the next chapter of his life and his story now that he's been out of the public eye for a bit. And back when he was doing his TV show, which was kind of late night talk show comedy esque, where he would do bits out on the street and get public reaction before he was really well known. And there was a part in the documentary where he talked about after being on TV, he didn't know what to do next, and so he built a studio in his house where it could film 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and anytime he felt like going to his desk and saying or doing something, he could. And it sparked the idea of was that kind of the origination of what became popular podcasting? And in that sense, he was a crazy comedian pushing the boundaries and the limitations, similar to the style of Monty Python, I think. And it was a real thinker to be like, wow, it is inspirationally, whether I'm a fan of him or not, he did something way ahead of his time that paved the way almost for what we're doing right now. And that is an inspiration.
The next question I'm going to ask you, Andrew, or shall I call you Drew, actually, really, because that's your kind of your thing on your podcast, isn't
Yeah,
it?
so you could call me either or. Obviously, my name is Andrew, but when we came up with the podcast, we didn't want to use our strict government given name. So my co-host and I came up with stage names, as we call them. So on the podcast, you'll hear me call myself Drew Beats. So you can call me Drew.
Yeah, Drew. Okay, so very similarly, my name's Martin. I'm also known as Marty, Marty, and I also came up with the stage name of Bone Idol, Marty Bone Idol, as in playing the trombone. And of course, it twists over to being a bit of a lazy sod, sometimes. So that was interesting. So the other thing I was going to ask you, and you probably okay. So I normally ask most of my guests what gives you peace, and I guess you're going to say some of those things that we've already discussed. But what I'll say to you is, what brings you peace? Tell me about that as we've discussed it. But also, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you get peace from?
Absolutely. Obviously, first and foremost, music brings a lot of peace to me in my life. If I'm stressed out, if I'm having a bad day, there's always a record for any scenario in my collection that I can put on. If it's noisy around the house between the family, the kids, the dogs, I can put my headphones on. I can space out and just drift into one of my favorite albums. And at the same time, obviously, if I want to add a little bit of product in with that, just to help silence the noise around me, that again, done in the correct way, brings a very calm, peaceful, meditative state over me. Outside of that, one of the benefits I have in my life is my wife, who is a she wears a lot of hats. We'll say that she is also in the health and wellness industry. She's a certified yogi and Pilates instructor. She is a meditation guide. She is a level 3 Reiki master, which if you're not familiar with that, it has to do with energy healing. And so I have that built into my own house. She gives me energy healing sessions. She helps me to meditate, whether we use product or not. She has taught me a lot about breath work. And so all of those practices we utilize in our house to help keep that peace and bring that calm and regulate ourselves in a lot of different ways. So I have that, and that is my answer.
Oh, that's beautiful because I can connect with that because I'm also a mindfulness practitioner and I do a lot of meditations myself and I like those kind of Far Eastern, if you like, traditional Chinese medicine kind of things that
Yeah.
you can do. It fits with
And we've
who I
been
am.
diving a lot more into those as opposed to standard, American medicinal practices. We've kind of shifted our mentality in the last few years to seek out those other what Americans consider non-traditional or holistic health of the East. It's been a blessing.
It makes it really nice, doesn't it? Okay, Andrew. I think um, I think I'm about done with my questions. Mate. It's been
All
really
right.
cool speaking to you.
Yeah,
Sorry about
right back
yesterday.
at you.
We all got mixed up yesterday. So
Hey, when you're working with time zones, it can be tricky to coordinate.
I was getting stressed. I'm thinking, what's going on? And then when you come back to me and said, oh, we've missed it. We've got an hour difference. And I thought, an hour out on the time zones. I thought, no one was, no one that's gone on. I was so pleased that we've agreed to set up again. And it's been really good chatting with you. So, last thing of all, right? Your chance to make an absolute shameless plug of your podcast. Okay, go for it, man.
I love it. I will always take the opportunity to shamelessly plug everything. But thank you for having me on and being able to share what I'm doing. And so the podcast, again, is called Vinally High. We are on all the major streaming platforms. So if you have Spotify, if you have Apple, if you have Amazon, we're on all of those, plus a few other minor ones. You can find us on Instagram at Vinally High Podcast, and the link in our profile page has the links to everything else that you can find us on. All of our other social platforms, our podcast streaming platforms. And then we also have a section for products and companies that we love that work with us that are have sponsored us or have appeared as guests. So I'm not just shamelessly plugging myself. I'm also going to plug all of our guests and the companies that we love. So find those links. If you want to know more, you can always direct message us and we can chat and then listen to the podcast because at the end of the day, that's what it's really about is growing our downloads. So please look us up and listen to us and let us know what you think. If it's
Yeah,
terrible, you
sure.
hated it, let me know. And if you loved it, let me know and let me know why.
Constructive feedback is what we call it, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, if we're only gauging ourselves, we're either our worst critics or our best supporters, but I want to know what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd encourage anybody else out there that's listening to this that is also a podcaster to encourage people to give you feedback because it's quite difficult to obtain from people. Can you can you comment on it? Can you? And you just kind of think, did that go down well or didn't it? You know?
We may think we did really well, but you might think otherwise.
Yeah, cool. Let's stay in touch, man. All right. And
Absolutely.
all right. That's cool meeting you. Okay, Andrew.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me on.
Andrew, take care. Bye for now.
You too. Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow, like, and share. Thank you very much. Martin, Peace Unplugged.